the Author to Author podcast series with award-winning author Pamela R Haynes.
Welcome to the podcast.
Dalgety Herbal Teas produce 100% natural high-quality organic teas using only the best ingredients. Available now from all major supermarkets, or please visit our website at dalgety.co. Dalgety Herbal Teas.
Hello, and thank you for joining me for another edition of the Author to Author podcast. My name is Pamela R Haynes, your host today. Thank you for tuning in. News hot off the press, I have been nominated for a Powerhouse Global Women Award for my work in raising awareness of domestic abuse through my books. I am absolutely delighted, and I look forward to attending the prestigious event in September. Secondly, the Author to Author podcast has been nominated for 3 Black Podcasting Awards, namely Best International Black Podcast, Black Podcast of the Year, and the Best New Black Podcast. I'm excited at the recognition, and I will keep you posted if we win. Thank you to Dalgety Herbal Teas, my producer Nigel Beckles, and the station managers at Pamtango Radio, East London Radio, and UK246.com for all of your support. In this episode, I interview my colleague, friend, and author, Shelley Twinn, author of Dating Is Us, Online Dating, The Twists and Turns of Love and Lust. Is it me, or is it hot in here? Catch you on the other side. Hello there, Shelley. How are you?
Oh, good evening, Pam. I'm very good, thank you, even though it's a rainy evening.
Thank you for joining me on the Author to Author podcast. We're going to jump in and have an interview about your book, your life, and your journey to date. So tell us, where are you from in the world, and where are you based now?
I was born in Hackney in East London in 1961. My mum was English. My dad was from St Vincent, the beautiful island of St Vincent in the Caribbean. I stayed in London most of my life. I lived in the Caribbean for a short while in the 90s, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and it gave me a fantastic insight into, if you could say, the other half of me. And my heritage that I didn't really know that much about. And I then came back to the UK, and I've travelled to most European countries, and I've lived in Spain most recently. I lived in Marbella most recently. And yeah, I've sort of come home to roost recently. Pandemic, I think a lot of people have stopped their travelling recently, and I am now in beautiful Epping Green, where I walk and I do all sorts of things. But yeah, I spent my formative years in Clapton in East London until I was 8, and we moved to Deptford, South East London, and I went to school in Greenwich, and I met some fantastic people throughout my teenage years that are quite well known now, people like Jules Holland and Ruby Turner, and lots of other people that became quite well known in the acting world and the music world. And yeah, so, and also music gave me a sort of an insight into an introduction, if you like, into the arts, because I performed very early. I started to play the recorder like most children do, and then I went on to violin and guitar. So I was a musician very, very early on.
Thank you for that, Shelley. I think we have to let the listeners know how we know each other. So the Shelley that I remember was very trendy in her levers. I'm sure at some stage, did you ride a motorbike, or did I just invent that?
I did. I passed my test before I passed my bike test, before I passed my car test, believe it or not. I became interested in bikes, and my partner at the time was also interested in bikes, so I learnt to ride a motorbike, and I had levers. In fact, I've still got them. I've still got my Isle of Man made motorbike levers, but unfortunately now I can't fit into them that well. So
I do recall you riding a motorbike. I do remember driving up and down in your Saab as well when we used to go to meetings, but we know each other mainly from working in the probation service. And if I'm right, Shelley, were you working for Essex Middlesex Probation Service at the
Yeah,
time
that's
before
right.
we amalgamated.
Yeah, I came back to the UK and I joined Middlesex Probation. Yeah, as a PSO, which is an auxiliary for the listeners, an auxiliary to probation officers, and that was the role that I had. And I did that for a year or so. And I thought, oh, you know what? I really want to train to become a probation officer. I was really interested in looking at the reasons why people committed crime. And that was more interesting than my previous role, which we'll probably come to in a minute. And also I felt that I was helping to help others to make a difference to their lives at that point. And we had a pretty free rein in those days. I sort of invented my own role, really, which was I used to do housing and help people with benefits and also, cases that we had. So I'd do lots of different things. I sort of invented the role. And as long as you got them through their community order, or if they were on a licence to the end of their licence and they didn't reoffend, then you were doing a positive job, which I'm very proud of the fact that I went into the probation service at that time.
We then met because I was a practice development assessor. And for my very first cohort of students, I had 3 ex-police officers and 1 social worker. And you were one of the police officers or former police officers. How long did you have a career for in the police service?
Well, it was almost 3 years. I joined the police. It was something I always wanted to do. And as a black female back in the early 90s, it was a very unusual step to take. And a lot of my family were very anti that anyway. But I'm pretty headstrong, and I decided to go to Hens and do it and join. It was really difficult training. I had 3 very young children at the time. And I was away. In those days, we did 18 weeks away. And we could come home weekends. So it was very difficult in that sense anyway. But I got through the training and I was posted to Dagenham Barking, Shadwell Heath area, where I worked for 2.5 years. I left because I had an injury on duty. I hurt a vertebrae in my neck. I won't tell you what I was doing, but I was trying to be Superwoman and tried to scale a fence. I managed to injure myself. Eventually I left because of the injury, but also the psychological impact that it had on me and the trauma, because it took me quite a while to recover, and I had 3 young children. So that's when I started looking for an alternative career. But because of what I'd learned in criminal justice, I thought I'd veer towards, stay in that field. And that's when I joined the probation service, which I found much more interesting, and eventually trained with you, Pam, to become a probation officer, which was fabulous. The training was amazing. Looking back, I really enjoyed that time.
I had fond memories of working with you also, in particular when you almost interviewed a service user for nearly 2 hours. I use the word interview very loosely. It was more like an interrogation. The only thing you didn't do was to shine a light in his eyes to get him to tell you the truth. So that was interesting. And I think your last assignment, your very last assignment had a profound effect on me. I can still remember the journey that you had been on starting the course, and how you qualified as a probation officer was, fantastic and well deserving of the grade A that you were awarded for that piece of work as well. You went into the field, although you kept in touch. There were a couple of you that kept in touch. And we got back in touch again when I invited you to come and perform at my book launch back in 2018. Do you want to tell us a bit about what's the start of your book journey from there?
I've always written. I've written lots of stuff, and I did lots of writing when I was very young. And I was always interested in psychology and people and what have you. And I always wanted to write a book. And the saying, there's a book in everyone, and everybody says that. And I believe that really is true. However, it's getting down to brass tacks and writing this book that is the difficult part. And for me, I've written lots of songs. I've written a screenplay about my dad coming over from the Caribbean, but I never actually did anything with it. Never did anything with anything. Scraps of paper, files everywhere. Never thought of getting anything published, didn't know how to do it, etc., etc. So I started, there was a lady who is no longer with us, bless her, who worked for the probation service, and she'd written a book. And that sort of inspired me in a way. Debs, bless her, Debs Porter. And she'd written a book, and I thought, that's brilliant, And when we lost touch, and then you invited me, Pam's written a book. I thought, Shelley, you've written a book. I'd written this book. I'd written this book about online dating, because what had happened is that at the time, lots of people around me were getting divorced, including myself, unfortunately. And lots of people were doing online dating. And I wasn't doing online dating, but I was listening to a lot of the stories of people. So in my head, I had all these vignettes of, that'd be interesting. And all these sort of scenarios started to come at me. So I thought, after, going home after work, I'd go and I'd start to write. But as I say, it eventually became a book. But in that time, my father was dementia, and he was quite ill, and he eventually passed away. And I remember dreaming of him saying to me, Shelley, just keep writing, write the book. And so I did. And so the next stage was when I came to your book launch, Pam. I thought, I've got to publish this. I met Marcia Spence, and she read the manuscript and said, yeah, this is a great story. And there you go. It sort of went from there. Fantastic.
Thank you for that summary. But tell us what Dated Is Us is all about.
Okay, so it's about, ironically, you could say, it's about a woman in her 40s. She was married. She had children, did what I call the white picket fence thing. Please don't take offence, anybody. But so she did everything she thought she should do. She hadn't really focused much on herself as a person. And what she did was, when she got divorced, she felt that she had to replace this person with somebody else. And online dating had become quite popular. So she tried it out. And she contacted several different agencies and had some successes and some not so successful. And she had some hilarious interactions with people as well. And she met people that as soon as she turned up, she felt she needed to walk out. So she persevered. Eventually, she meets somebody that she felt she had a connection with. And she started to date this person. But throughout Dating Is Us, and the hilarious side of it, and there's also some racy bits in it, 50 Shades of Grey, etc. I'm not advertising, but there's some racy parts in that, quite descriptive. She decides that she needs to focus on herself a little bit more, because this person that she thought she had the connection with wasn't actually coming up with the goods. But then she asked herself, what are the goods? Because she didn't want to settle down and have any more children, because she was not too old, but she felt that she'd already done that. And she felt that as I say, society says you've got to be with somebody, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. So throughout all of this process, and this person, as I said, wasn't giving her what she thought she needed, she realises that what she needs to do is focus on herself as a woman. And she'd not done this since time immemorial. She'd not actually taken time to get to know herself. So the book is actually, although it's about online dating, it's actually about her voyage of, it sounds like a cliche, but it was about her voyage of discovering herself as a woman, learning to love herself, what she was a woman in her 40s, of colour. And then at the end, she decides she doesn't actually need anybody else, but she continues, and she learned so much about herself. So that's what the book is about.
It really is an entertaining read. So thank you for that. Are you able to read one of the stories to us?
Yeah, of course.
Just a little few paragraphs, a bit of snippet for us, please.
This is funny because I'm going to mention somebody quite famous in a minute, and it's just so happens to be how things pan out. So she goes on a date. She meets this guy online. He looks quite nice. In those days, you didn't have the video thing, so you couldn't actually see them. So you'd swap numbers, have a chat online and whatever. And then, so she meets this guy, and she calls him City Boy because she meets him in the city, and she meets him at the Royal Exchange. And prior to the meeting, he'd said to her, "Oh, I'll buy you champagne when I meet you. You know, you sound very sophisticated, etc." Anyway, she meets him. They go into the Royal Exchange. And this is from the book, page 30. City boy led me to a table not far from the bar. I sat down and he attempted to take his man bag off his shoulder and take off his jacket, which was quite comical and put me in mind of a character from a TV comedy that at that moment I just couldn't place. The bar was quite full and had an exciting buzz about it. "It's rather warm in here, don't you think?" he said, eventually freeing his bag and hanging his jacket over the chair next to the table. "I'm quite comfortable," I replied. He glanced at me and smiled back. "Okay, what would you like to drink?" Then the floor. I was taken aback by the lush surroundings, the buzz of the city, the expensive-looking furnishings, and the fact that I was on a first date. "I'll have a bottle of champagne, please," I bleated. "But only the finest. I hate cheap champagne." Oh, shit, I thought, as soon as the words came out of my mouth. He must think I'm a right player. I originally remember City Boy saying when arranging the date that he would take me for champagne, but probably never in his wildest dreams did he think that I would ask for a whole bottle. And then it goes on. She gets her champagne. She has this in her hand. She's thinking, oh gosh, she thinks, this guy looks like somebody. And anyway, from the book again, the date was going well, but I hated the stubble. He had this stubble on his chin, you know, that sort of George Michael look back in the day. Then I realised that he looked like somebody well known, an actor. That had to be why the photo was blurred, the original photo that he put out on his profile. Oh, then it dawned on me who he looked like. Wait for it. Oh no, I thought. I'm with a Ricky Gervais lookalike. Nothing against Ricky, by the way. A great talented guy. But then I got to thinking funny thoughts and could not avert my attention to the purpose of the evening without wanting to laugh and think of The Office, that David Brent dance and the song Handbags and Glad Rags. And I wanted to collapse in a fit of giggles, and my face must have told the story of my headspace at that moment. So there you go. She meets Ricky Gervais.
Thank you so much for that. But Shelley, tell us, how easy was the writing process for you?
Okay, so the ideas flood into your head. You've got to put them down on paper, well, on a laptop paper. I sort of get inspiration. It's like if I write a song, stuff just comes to me. Inspiration and sort of the outline of the story just sort of came and flowed naturally. When it came to the actual publishing and the editing of it, then that was a little bit more difficult because you've got to go backwards and you've literally got to go over each word and you've got to edit and take out bits and pieces and put in bits and pieces, checking your spelling. And you've also got to bear in mind that people may not be interested in every single line that you've written. So you've got to sort of change your perspective as to what the reader might be interested in. So although I found the actual writing easy, and I do find writing easy, the process of editing and going backwards and forwards and backwards and again and again and again and was difficult. But because I had such a good teacher in terms of learning to write reports, Pam, because you helped me to do that. And also you taught me to look for detail and, you know, look for mistakes, et cetera, et cetera. So that grounding actually helped me with my writing because, as I said to lots of people, I've been writing for the government for years and it's about time I wrote something for myself. So, yeah, it was easy, but there are difficult parts to writing and producing a book.
Thank you for that. And I'm glad that I was able to help in some small way. Accompanying the book is also a CD. So you've already said that you have sung. Tell us some of the famous people that you have sung for and tell us a little bit about your EP, Late Life Love.
Yeah. Well, I mean, before COVID, I mean, I've sung with quite a few people, but one of the peaks of my career was singing with Stephen Colarzzo's Odyssey. And that was, I was sort of filling in for Michelle John and I was singing with KJ Sutherland. So I was singing with Odyssey. Now, these were one of my favourite bands when I was growing up. And so I knew all the songs. So, you know, I just had to sort of learn bits and pieces. So I had a great time just before our sort of lockdown period in 2019, singing with Odyssey. I wrote Late Life Love, Ain't Got Time to Love You, and We Got the Love. And those are the three songs that accompany the book, Dating Is Us. And I wrote these songs with Ian Lewinson and Kevin Anderson. And Ian Lewinson is now in the theatre production Get Up, Stand Up, the Bob Marley musical. So it's great. And yeah, we still play together quite often. We do lots of private functions, and we've got videos and things that we've done as well. We're actually in a band called the Heart and Soul Band. So if anybody wants to book us for a function, and Ian's not busy, that is, we'd be willing to come along and play for you. So yeah, you can get the Late Life Love because the main character was in her 40s when she met a late life love. So I wrote the song about that experience. I've performed that as well at various events, and I don't know how many I've sold, but it's I've not bought the mansion yet, let's just put it that way.
Definitely something that you enjoy. So can you give us a couple of bars?
Yeah, definitely. What I'll do is I will sing to the actual music. Late life love, late life love, late life love, late life love. The amazing thing about the situation was love described itself as my best friend. The holding hands and kiss together. That's the first verse of Late Life Love, and thank you. And that's available on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, etc. But that accompanies the book. Yeah, that's
Fantastic.
great.
Can you tell us about any future projects that you have coming up?
Yeah, at the moment, I mean, I'm singing with my jazz band and my Heart and Soul band. And in September, I am doing a show called Billy and Etta. So I will be singing Billie Holiday songs and Etta James songs. So we'll see how that goes as a show. And so that's my musical side, my sorted. And also I've started to write my second book, which has taken a little bit longer. And it's called You're the Colour of Coffee, Love. Now, this is about my sort of experiences growing up as a dual heritage mixed race child, because we get called different things every month, But more importantly, it's about my mum and a lot of the white women that supported their black children and their black men in the late 50s and early 60s. And when I was subjected to racism at school as a young child, and people would start to call me names and say to me, you're this, you're that, I would come, I remember coming home and saying to my mum, what am I? What colour am I? And she'd say, you're the colour of coffee, love. And she said, and I love my coffee. So this is what the book is about. So it's very emotional. And because my mum passed and my dad has passed now. But it gave me gives me the insight of how strong they were as a couple. They were married for over 50 years, and they stood by us and they gave us a good grounding, and helped us to become the people that we are now, my brother and sister and I. I just admire them. Looking back now, I admire them because they had society against them. My mum would walk down the street and people would give her dirty looks and spit on the floor because she had, black kids with her. So, yeah, so that's my second book. And that might take me a little bit longer to write, but I'm going to do it.
Wonderful. And it's a wonderful tribute to both of your parents as well. Promise me you'll come back when you've published that book as well.
Well, you have influenced me in lots of ways that I couldn't even begin to mention. I've mentioned a couple, but there are others as well.
Thank you for that. But Shelley, please tell us, when you're not writing books, making music, singing in bands, all the other things that you do, what do you do to unwind and relax? How does that look?
I used to, Well, I suppose my writing and my music are relaxation. This is a very strange, well, I think a lot of people find it very strange, but I thought I've got a certain age now. I've got a garden, but I decided to get myself an allotment. So a little piece of land, and just got it actually. And I go over and I dig and I've started to plant things, and it's so relaxing. And people over there, you meet a couple of people, very, very laid back. So I'm actually, it's the earth, it's nature that I like. And I walk quite a lot nowadays as well. I've bought official walking boots because I live in Epping Green in Essex, and I live on farmland more or less. So I'm out walking. So it's walking and allotments I sort of do. And then I listen to a lot of music because I'm learning. I'm still learning the Billie Holiday and the Etta James songs. Though I know them, I'm teaching myself the lyrics. And I've also got grandchildren now, which take up a bit of my time. 3 granddaughters. So that's how I relax.
Oh, wow. I'm super duper impressed of how you managed to fit it all in, Shelley.
I think I've always been a person that is looking for the next sort of challenge, I suppose, and realised some of my dreams, like singing with Odyssey was one of the best things I ever did. And, getting my degree as a dyslexic that I found out later on was also, a challenge. So, yeah, music and the earth, nature. I used to travel quite a bit. Obviously, COVID stopped that, but that can start up again now. So I will be doing that as well, getting some sun, hopefully in the Caribbean soon. So.
Yeah, just a final thing, really. It's been quite topical in the news over the last few days. A serious case review was opened up regarding a child who they are calling Child Q. And I thought that as you were previously a former police officer, that I would ask you, the story very briefly is that she was pulled from an exam. Her teacher said she smelt of cannabis. The police were called and they strip searched her. Just appalling, really. 2 years on now, the review has come out to say that racism was involved in their profiling of this child. But from your experience, what should have happened in that particular case?
Well, this is horrific. When I heard this, I was, it's part of you that feels I worked in the police for a while, and what should have happened with this young child is, she was in an examination. She should have been able to finish her examination. How humiliating for that child. But what should have happened is, if I were dealing with that, I would have waited until she'd finished. I would have spoken to teachers. What they should have done is they should have had an appropriate adult with her at least. And also, you have to have their permission to be able to do that to a child, because this is a safeguarding issue. This child was abused. We are looking at the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984 here, and there are certain procedures that are used with people that are vulnerable, and this child is vulnerable. This child is a vulnerable child, and she should have been, as I say, she should have had an appropriate adult representation, legal representation. But strip searching, I don't know what the grounds were. They should have had, what the grounds were, but even so, not alone. I don't know where they searched her, whether it was in the school or they took her back to the station. But this should only happen as a last result. We talk about child protection and safeguarding. And, as I say, appropriate adults should have been present. And this is also a violation of this child's human rights.
Thank you very much, Shelley. No doubt over the coming weeks, more will unfold with this story. So perhaps by the time your episode is published, there will be a bit more clearer understanding of what went down there. But as a minimum, and as a parent, we would have expected her parents to be called and informed of what was happening, given them the opportunity to be present at the school. Furthermore, you're profiling someone on the fact that they have dreadlocks and they smell of weed. Well, the last I realised, they're not grounds really for then wanting to search somebody. You might want to look in their school bag, you might want to look in their school shoes or search their pockets, their coats. but you wouldn't have expected that kind of intimate search to take place.
That was not correct procedure according to PACE.
So, Shelley, how can listeners get hold of you, and how can they get hold of your book?
Okay, right. I've been published by Austin Macaulay, and so they can go onto Amazon and find the book, or they can go to the Austin Macaulay website and find the book. But Amazon's probably everybody's choice. Dating is Us, Online Dating, The Twists and Turns of Love and Lust by Shelley Twinn. It's a good read. As I said, it's racy in parts, and it's also about self-love as well. So I recommend it highly.
Of course you do. And so do I, which is why I'm having you on the podcast, this evening. There's also a foreword written by someone that we all know as well. But I'm going to ask for listeners to buy a copy of the book so they can see that for themselves. Shelley, it's been wonderful catching up with you. It's been fab. So thank you so much for taking part in the Author to Author podcast. And no doubt we'll hear from you soon when you come back with your second book.
Yes, this is encouragement now, and I certainly will. And thank you so much, Pam. And yeah, great. I love your show. Been listening to it, and I'm honoured to be able to be a part of this as well, part of your journey. And thank you very much.
It's competition time now. Did you enjoy the singing? What is the name of the song that Shelley sang? Send me a message on Instagram at Loving the Author for your chance to win a copy of her book, Dating is Us. Have a great week ahead until the next episode of the Author to Author podcast. Bye for now.
Please join Pamela R Haynes for another Author to Author podcast coming soon.